Mr. Brown, I really want to learn English quickly. Do you have any tips?
Absolutely, Susie. The first thing is to immerse yourself in the language. Surround yourself with English every day, whether through movies, music, or books.
That sounds great. But sometimes I find it hard to keep up with new vocabulary. How can I learn new words faster?
One way to do that is by using flashcards or apps like Anki. You can also learn words in context by reading sentences and understanding how the words are used.
I see. And what about speaking? I get nervous when I have to speak in English. Any advice?
Practice speaking as much as possible. Even if you don't have a partner, you can talk to yourself, record your voice, or even use language exchange platforms online.
That's a good idea. But I often get confused with grammar. How can I improve my grammar without feeling overwhelmed?
Focus on the basics first, like sentence structure and verb tenses. Then, practice with simple sentences until you feel comfortable. Don't worry about making mistakes. They're part of learning.
Thanks. I've also heard that reading helps a lot. How do I make the most of it?
Choose books or articles that are interesting to you, and don't be afraid to start with easier material. Gradually increase the difficulty as you get more confident.
I'll try that. And how do I stay motivated throughout this process?
Set small, achievable goals and celebrate when you reach them. Also, remind yourself why you want to learn English. It'll help you stay focused.
That's really helpful, Mr. Brown. But sometimes I feel like I'm not making progress. How do I know if I'm improving?
It's normal to feel that way, Susie. One way to track your progress is by setting milestones, like being able to introduce yourself in English or understand a full conversation. You'll see the improvements over time.
I think I understand. But sometimes I feel overwhelmed by how much there is to learn. How do I avoid burnout?
Take breaks when you need them. Learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. It's important to pace yourself and enjoy the process rather than rush through it.
That's a great point. Do you think it's important to learn English grammar rules, or should I focus more on speaking?
Both are important, but speaking is key to building confidence. Grammar comes naturally with practice, so don't stress over it too much. Focus on communication first, then fine-tune your grammar as you go.
That makes sense. What about listening skills? I find it hard to understand native speakers sometimes. How can I improve?
Listening practice is crucial. Start with slow podcasts or videos and gradually increase the speed as you get more comfortable. Also, try listening to different accents to get used to various speaking styles.
That's a good idea. How can I make sure I'm using English correctly in conversations with others?
The best way is by practicing with native speakers or other learners. You can join language exchange groups or find a tutor who can correct your mistakes and guide you.
I've heard people say that reading out loud helps. Do you think that's true?
Yes, reading out loud helps with pronunciation and fluency. It also reinforces sentence structures and vocabulary. Try reading books, news articles, or even dialogues from movies out loud.
I'll definitely try that. But what about writing? I often struggle to write in English. Any tips?
Start with simple writing exercises, like keeping a journal in English. Write a few sentences each day about your day or thoughts. Over time, you'll see improvements in both writing and grammar.
That sounds manageable. I've also heard that learning phrasal verbs is important. Should I focus on them too?
Yes, phrasal verbs are common in everyday English. Start with the most common ones like get up, give up, or look after, and try using them in sentences. It'll make your English sound more natural.
I've been trying to learn them, but it's tough to remember all of them. Do you have any strategies?
A good strategy is to learn phrasal verbs in context. For example, when you read a story or listen to a conversation, note down any phrasal verbs you hear. This way, you learn them naturally.
That's a smart approach. But what if I forget a word or phrase while speaking? Should I stop and look it up?
It's okay to pause, but don't worry about looking up every word. You can try to explain what you mean using other words, or simply ask the person to repeat or explain.
I like that idea. Sometimes I'm scared of making mistakes, though. How can I get over that fear?
Mistakes are part of the learning process, Susie. The more you speak, the more confident you'll become. Think of mistakes as opportunities to improve, not as failures.
I'll try to think of it that way. How can I practice English every day without getting bored?
You can make it fun by mixing different activities. Watch a movie in English one day, then try writing a story the next. You can also play language games or listen to songs and try to understand the lyrics.
I love that idea. But what about reading? I sometimes find it hard to stay focused on longer texts. Any advice?
Start with shorter articles or books and gradually work your way up. Don't force yourself to finish a whole chapter in one sitting. Take breaks if needed, and make sure the material is interesting to you.
I think that will help a lot. And what about using apps? Are there any apps you recommend for learning English?
There are many great apps. Duolingo is good for beginners, and Memrise is great for vocabulary. If you want to focus on speaking, try HelloTalk or Tandem to chat with native speakers.
Those sound useful. How can I make sure I'm using them effectively?
Set a daily goal for yourself. Whether it's learning 5 new words or practicing speaking for 10 minutes, consistency is key. Also, try to review what you've learned regularly to reinforce it.
I'll definitely set goals. But what if I feel like I'm not improving as quickly as I'd like?
Progress takes time, Susie. Be patient with yourself and celebrate small victories. If you're consistent and keep practicing, you'll see improvements over time.
I'm really starting to feel more confident about learning English now. But I've heard that sometimes people learn better with a study partner. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yes, Susie. Having a study partner can really boost your motivation. You can practice speaking with each other, quiz each other on vocabulary, and correct each other's mistakes. It's a great way to stay accountable.
That sounds like fun. But what if I can't find someone to practice with? How can I still practice speaking?
If you can't find a study partner, there are still plenty of ways to practice speaking. You can use language exchange apps, where you chat with native speakers, or even practice speaking aloud to yourself. You can also try shadowing, which means repeating what you hear in movies or podcasts.
I've heard about shadowing before, but I'm not sure how to do it correctly. Can you explain?
Sure. Shadowing involves listening to a short clip of English, then immediately repeating what you hear, trying to match the pronunciation and intonation. It helps improve your speaking fluency and listening comprehension. Start with short phrases and work your way up.
That sounds challenging but useful. What about pronunciation? I know I need to improve mine. How can I do that?
A great way to improve pronunciation is by mimicking native speakers. Pay attention to how they pronounce words, especially tricky sounds. You can use apps like Forvo, where you can hear native speakers say words, or use YouTube videos with pronunciation guides.
I'll try that. Sometimes I feel like my accent is holding me back. Should I focus on getting rid of my accent, or is it okay to keep it?
An accent is part of who you are, and it's perfectly fine to have one. The goal is to be understood clearly. Focus on improving pronunciation and intonation so that your message comes across well, rather than worrying too much about having a perfect accent.
That makes me feel better. What about idioms? I hear them all the time, but they confuse me. Should I try to learn them?
Idioms are a fun part of the language, but they can be tricky. It's helpful to learn a few common ones like break the ice or hit the nail on the head. You don't need to memorize every idiom, but understanding them will make you sound more natural in conversation.
I'll start with the most common ones. Sometimes, though, I find it hard to stay focused when I'm studying for a long time. Do you have any tips to stay focused?
Try the Pomodoro technique. Study for 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. After 4 sessions, take a longer break. This helps keep your brain fresh and prevents burnout. You can also change up your study routine to keep things interesting.
That sounds like a great way to stay focused. What about writing in English? Should I focus on writing essays, or is it better to start with short texts?
Start with short texts like emails, journal entries, or social media posts. Writing essays is important later on, but short writing tasks are easier to manage and help you build confidence. You can gradually work your way up to more complex writing.
I'll try to write more often. Do you think it's important to learn English slang? I hear it a lot in movies and songs.
Slang can be fun and useful, but it's not essential for basic communication. If you're planning to travel or work in an English-speaking country, understanding slang can help you fit in. But focus on learning standard English first, then gradually pick up slang as you go.
That makes sense. What about watching movies? Do you think it's better to watch with subtitles, or should I try without them?
It depends on your level. If you're a beginner, start with subtitles in your native language. As you improve, switch to English subtitles. Eventually, try watching without subtitles to challenge your listening skills and improve comprehension.
I'll start with subtitles and work my way up. What about the difference between British and American English? Should I focus on one over the other?
Mr. Brown, it's up to you. Both British and American English are widely used, and the differences are mostly in vocabulary, spelling, and pronunciation. Pick the one you feel more comfortable with, but don't worry about it too much. Most people understand both.
I've been focusing on American English because I watch a lot of American TV shows. Is that okay?
Absolutely. If you're more exposed to American English, it makes sense to focus on it. Just be aware of the differences if you ever need to use British English, but don't stress about it.
I'm glad I'm on the right track. Sometimes I get frustrated when I can't express myself the way I want to. How can I get better at expressing myself in English?
It takes time, Susie. The more you practice, the easier it will become. Try to focus on expressing your ideas clearly, even if you don't know every word. It's more important to communicate your message than to get every detail perfect.
That's a great way to look at it. How can I make my English sound more natural, like a native speaker?
One way is to listen to native speakers and mimic their rhythm and tone. Pay attention to how they use contractions like I'm instead of I am, and how they shorten phrases. Over time, you'll start to sound more natural.
I'll start paying more attention to that. Is there a specific time of day that's best for studying English?
The best time to study is when you feel most alert and focused. Some people prefer studying in the morning, while others do better in the evening. Find what works best for you and stick to a routine.
I'm usually more focused in the morning, so I'll try to study then. How do you stay motivated when learning a language gets tough?
I remind myself of my goals and why I started learning in the first place. Setting small, achievable goals keeps me motivated. And I also celebrate every little success, whether it's understanding a new word or completing a lesson.
That's a great mindset. I'll try to focus on my goals and celebrate small victories. Thank you so much for all your advice, Mr. Brown.
You're very welcome, Susie. Keep practicing, stay positive, and remember that learning English is a journey. You're doing great, and you'll continue to improve.
Thanks, Mr. Brown. This has been really helpful. I feel more motivated to keep going now.
You're welcome, Susie. Keep practicing, and remember that learning a language is a journey. Stay positive, and you'll reach your goals.